Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you here today. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Archway Academy for including me in your very special day and your special luncheon today. Before I get started, I'm going to ask each of you to close your eyes just for a minute. I know it's lunchtime, so don't fall asleep, but I'd like you to close your eyes for just a minute. What is the first image that comes to your mind when you think of an alcoholic or a drug addict? Is it the person under the bridge that's drinking out of a brown paper bag? Is it the celebrities that you see on TV that are in and out of celebrity fancy treatment centers and in and out of recovery? Is it your doctor or your surgeon? Is it the pilot that just flew you and your family on your last vacation? Or maybe it's someone a little closer to home. Maybe it's your child or your parent or someone in your family, or maybe a really close friend. Hello, my name is Carrie Steinseifer Bates, and I'm an alcoholic living in long-term recovery since February 1st of 2012, and this is what we look like. I was thinking as I was preparing for this talk today about how much the world has changed in the last 18 to 20 months. Me doing this presentation to you virtually is a prime example of that. But there's so much that has changed. The world has been full of fear and uncertainty and the unknown, and also a lot of death and a lot of mourning and loss, all very similar traits to that of addiction. Some things, however, have remained the same. And two of those things for me personally is one, July 29th of 1984, when I won my first gold medal in swimming at the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was something that I had dreamt of my entire life, to be an Olympian and to be an Olympic gold medalist. And I'll never forget that day. I swam the 100-meter freestyle. It was 2 laps of the pool. When I touched that wall at the finish, I looked up at the scoreboard and the number 1 was by my name. I did it. I had reached the ultimate goal that I had set for myself as a little girl, and I was now an Olympic champion. The other date that stands out to me that will never change is January 25th of 2012, when I took my last drink of alcohol and entered a residential treatment program for the 4th time in 2 years. Probably pretty interesting that those two things can exist in the same sentence for the same person. Today, I'm going to spend a brief amount of time talking to you about addiction, recovery, and ultimately redemption. The message I hope you will take away is that I am recovering because of the we of this program. All the teachers, the counselors, the therapists, and the many, many people that I travel this journey with, my fellow comrades in recovery, the people that have guided me into a sustainable recovery. I'm very proud of the hard work and dedication that I've put into my own recovery. But I would not be here without the we of recovery. Early on the morning of January 25th of 2012, I sat at my kitchen table, drinking alcohol out of a coffee cup with the 2 friends that I had left, thinking, of course, that nobody knew that I was drinking. They both looked at me, and then they looked at each other and said, "Now what do we do with her?" I had not seen my young daughters in weeks, because my husband was no longer willing to allow them to be exposed to my drinking. I had been in residential treatment 3 times at this point, and yet I was once again in another relapse. A relapse of my chronic, incurable disease, just like many other chronic illnesses, heart disease, diabetes, and many others. This is a cunning, baffling, and powerful disease, but it is also very patient and very opportunistic. And if we don't invest into our recovery, we will have a return to use, which I did many, many times in my efforts over the years to get sober. I remember one time I was told that what I put in front of my sobriety, I will lose. And unfortunately, I had to go on and prove that in my life. I wanted to run that morning. I wanted to run far away. The thought of going to treatment again to me was daunting. But where was I going to go? There was nowhere left to run. I had been running for years, in and out of treatment centers, in and out of friendship groups, running away from my own children. I knew that if I drank again, I knew full well if I drank again, that I would lose everything. My career, my friendships, my long-term marriage, and ultimately my children. I remember thinking to myself that morning as I sat at the kitchen table, if I can be the best in the world at something, how and why can't I figure out this little problem I seem to be having with alcohol? So here I was, once again at the crossroads. The alcohol at this point had stopped working, so I was stuck. I couldn't live with it, and I couldn't imagine my life without it. I was completely and totally hopeless. So now what? Now what do we do? Empty bottles were strewn all over my house, cigarette butts everywhere. I was dirty, and I was too sick to even let my dog in the backyard. I came to sometime in the early hours of the morning, the day after my friends had been sitting at that kitchen table. And I'm not sure if I call it a spiritual awakening, an epiphany, or a message from my higher power. But I knew in that moment that I had taken my last drink. I had gone to great lengths for years to drink, no matter the consequences. Yet in that moment, I knew I was done. I had been in very dark places emotionally during my drinking, to the point where I wanted to end my life several times. That morning, I did make a deal with my higher power, and I told my higher power that if I survived a detox at home alone, which I would never recommend, it was very dangerous, that I would go to treatment one more time and try and save my life. And that began a very painful 5 days of detox at home alone, with hallucinations, hearing TVs that weren't on, thinking people were in my home that were not. But you know what? I survived. So that morning when I woke up on day 5, I made what I hoped to be the last call to a treatment center for me to come to treatment. I spent 90 days in treatment that year in 2012, and it was the greatest gift that I ever gave myself, because I knew when I had survived that detox that there was a greater purpose for me. There was a reason that I was still here, and I needed to find out what it was. Here I was, a broken shell of a woman, a mother that had walked away from her own children. I lost a long and successful career at Nike. I was dirty, I hadn't eaten in days, and was surviving on the calories of alcohol. A woman who didn't know if it were night or day unless I looked out of the blinds of my home. Most of my friends were gone at this point, except the 2 that were there that morning. But the 2 mainstays in my life before I went to treatment that last time in 2012 were my older brother and my sweet father. I'm quite sure they hated me at that point, or at least they were pretty frustrated with me. But that seemed totally okay with me at that time, because nobody was really better at hating myself than I was. So how does a person like me end up there? How does my life end up so unmanageable? I didn't come from a broken home, but I did come from an alcoholic home. I had 2 parents that loved and supported me and encouraged me in pursuing my dreams of being an Olympic champion, of going to college, and of all the other normal things that many of us as young kids dream of doing. But the alcoholism in my family is really what drove me to the pool. It drove me to that place where I felt safe and nobody could really hear me cry underwater. That's a place where I would go as a kid and work out my fears and my frustrations and my anger And I was able to express there what I could not express in my own home because it had become my safe place. And I just so happened to be pretty good at it. So that helped too. But I had the trifecta. I had the hole in my soul, the genetic predisposition that I didn't know anything about. And I also had this brain wiring that is different than most people's. But interestingly enough, it's that same brain wiring that's different than most people that allowed me to be an Olympic champion. So how does that mental malady exist in one person and contribute both to my brightest days and my darkest days? You know, I have seen the world from a view that very, very few people ever get, but I have also seen hell on earth, and I hope nobody that I love and care about ever have to see that place. On the outside, it appeared I had it all. 3 Olympic gold medals, a family of means, 2 beautiful children, a promising and successful career traveling the world, but nothing could seem to fill that hole in my soul. I spent years acting as if, and silently I was dying inside. But I had finally found my end, my bottom. I spent 90 days in treatment in 2012, and guess what? I got well. Not because of some sort of miracle, but because I finally found some traction in recovery and a way to navigate and sustain recovery from a progressive, chronic illness that has no cure, but there is a solution. I finally got it. And I learned sometimes it takes more than one time to get it. I've spent the last 6 years telling my story that treatment works and that we change the world by using our voice and by telling our stories. And I say 6 years, I've almost been sober 10. Took me 4 years to go public with my recovery, and that's the shame and guilt that's attached to this disease. I use my full name. People know where I live and what community I live in. And people also know who my employer is. I am not going to hide in recovery. I hid in my active disease, and I will not hide in recovery. My kids are now grown, but they also use their stories and their voices because my story is not theirs. They use their story to help change the world and to help change the stigma of this disease, because this disease does not discriminate. This disease caused me to do bad things. It caused me to act irresponsibly, and I hurt people I love and those that love me. I wasn't a bad person trying to get good. I was a very sick person trying to get well, but I am one of the lucky ones because I got well. I learned that addiction had consumed every fiber of who I was, and that if I wanted to live this life that I was promised in recovery, that my recovery had to consume every part of my life too. Just like being an elite athlete had also consumed every fiber of my body, and I was successful at that too. Swimming provided me the highs that I never knew I needed, and they prevented me from feeling the lows. I loved the rush of racing, the challenge of training, and the absolute sheer joy of winning. And it all helped me avoid the lows in my life. When that period of my life ended, I no longer had those highs, and I had no way to prevent the low lows. And lo and behold, there was that giant hole in my soul that existed. I, of course, got wrapped in the wine and baby culture, play dates with other moms that would drink at noon and, mommy, baby on the hip and wine on the lip. And as a matter of fact, just recently I was invited to a social where it was come for a full body cleanse, but have a drink. And I thought, wow, but I subscribed to all of it because at the end of the day, I was looking for people that needed and wanted to drink like I did. Recovery has given me more than I could have ever imagined, and it's given me everything that I had been searching for my entire life. I have remarried to an amazing man. I have a relationship today with my 2 daughters that I only dreamt of, and I have a new career at Hazelden Betty Ford, the very place that saved my life. The day I got hired, they handed me a key to the building, and I thought, do they not remember my stories from being in treatment here? And you can only imagine how happy I felt the first paycheck I received, because now they were actually paying me. Aside from my children, my recovery is my greatest single accomplishment and what I am most proud of. The Olympic gold medals really gave me the platform today to use my name, my face, and my story to tell people that we can and do recover. Nothing good in my life has come without a lot of hard work, and my recovery has by far been the hardest. But my hardest day sober is still far better than my best day drunk. My husband made some vows to me the day that we got married, and he told me that he would walk in front of me to protect me, and he would walk behind me in case I slipped and fell. And when I was strong enough, he would walk next to me and hold my hand with pride. And I'm so, so happy that I get to walk next to him today. You all in the audience today in Houston, and all of you amazing people at Archway Academy, are beacons of hope and agents for change for our kids and for your community. Getting sober was in my 40s was incredibly difficult. I can't imagine traveling this journey as a teenager. You have the we at Archway Academy and are giving these kids a hope and a clear path for sobriety and success in life. My call to action for all of you today is 1, give where you can to Archway Academy and to the recovery community at large in Houston. Number 2, if you have substance use disorder in your family, you must talk to your children and grandchildren about it. I knew nothing about genetic predisposition, and we owe it to future generations to let them know what is running through their veins. If you are a family that understands and has been touched by addiction, share your story with somebody else that doesn't know. Use your voice to make change. And lastly, if you are someone that is in recovery from anything, tell your story. Your voice, your face will change the world and the perception and stigma that we have towards addiction. Thank you again for having me here today. It's been such a pleasure being able to address all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your lunch.